900 hour Central African time on a beautiful Sunday morning here in Johannesburg. You know, watching Media Monitor, we take a look at the weekly newsmakers. I'm Alicia Jali. Before we get started, these are the current news headlines this morning. The ANC's NEC meeting enters its final day with the country's ailing economy still topping the agenda. We have a new Miss South Africa. Ntandoyenkosi Kunene was crowned last night at Carnival City in Johannesburg. And with the start of the 2016 Olympic and Paralympic Games looming large, the South African Sports Confederation and Olympic Committee has intensified its efforts to get local athletes ready. And now a quick browse through the Sunday newspaper headlines. The Sunday Times headline is leading with a story about former cabinet spokesman implicating the president to give government business to the Gupta family. That's the City Press. They're leading with the story about the NC's NEC members squashing the Gupta family issue during the sitting. The Sunday Independent leads with a story about the looming cabinet reshuffle, which is set for next week. The Weekend Argus also leads with a headline about that specific cabinet reshuffle. And last but not least also is the Sunday Tribune leading with the same cabinet reshuffle story. Good morning. I'm very pleased to be joined this morning by Political Analyst and Professor at the University of Johannesburg's Humanities faculty, Professor Kwandile and Kondlo, as well as Sowetan editor Mpumelelo Mkhabela, who's also the chairperson of SANEF. Gentlemen, a very good morning. Good to have you in studio, both of you.
Good morning.
All right, let's get started now. Almost all Sunday newspaper headline stories revolve around the controversial Gupta family. But our pick of the day today is, of course, the front page of the Sunday Times, a business front page, the defining moment for ANC to save South Africa from junk status. Now, gentlemen, some of the country's top executives here apparently believe that if the ANC acts quickly to stem the rot at the core of the institution of government, South Africa might just avoid that downgrade to junk status. What do you think, Prof?
Well, Alicia, I think that is correct. It's correct in the sense that I still don't think the budget deficits of government are so bad to the extent that South Africa could just be downgraded to junk status. I still think there is something we can do, especially if we try as much as we can to restore confidence and make sure that governance and institutional integrity is seriously attended to. And I think in that way, really, South Africa can still remain, even if it's just one notch above the junk status.
Mpumelelo, what do you think?
Well, look, partly they are correct, because actually it's about saying what is it that is within us, that is under our control. Because there are certain economic factors or political factors which could be beyond our control. For example, one economic factor that's beyond our control is the slowing demand of commodities, where a commodity-producing country, the demand is slow. That we can't control. You can't control if a financial crisis emanates from elsewhere. But there are certain things that are within our control. We can certainly control our politics. We can certainly give confidence to the finance minister, whose duty it is now to actually ensure there's confidence in the economy. Investors and rating agencies have confidence in him. But are we doing that? No. Some other people are pulling on the other side. We can certainly assure investors and give confidence in the country if we restore credibility in the institutions of government. Whether it is SARS, which is an important institution, whether it is the office of the president himself, it is an important institution. But are we doing that? We seem not to be doing that. So what the business people are saying, in fact, the statement they issued actually across all businesses, business organizations, whether it's business leadership, SA and all of those other organizations, which are the major captains of industry in this country, who control the economy, who run the economy, they know what they're talking about. They can't just be talking, and also their money is at stake as well. Of course, alongside that is jobs. People's jobs are at stake if you don't fix this problem. If they are telling you that we are the business people, we are the investors, this is what we can do to give us confidence. You can't tell them that you're joking. It's their money, it's their investment, it's their factories, it's their machines, it's their services, everything. It's here. So I think it's important that they are heeded. And they are actually trying to say to the ANC, it's within you. You actually have the capacity to do it. Just you have to be willing to do so.
But Prof, what do you think about the fact that, and we're going to talk about this later on, I mean, Moody's, the timing of the revelations about the Guptas, and then Moody's coming for a review of the country to junk status?
Well, maybe one could argue that it's just an unfortunate coincidence. But I still think the revelations about the Guptas were going to come anyway. It just depended when. One important point which I think Mpumelelo Mkhabela is mentioning, dealing with issues that are within our control, I think is a very important one. And the issue of presidential leadership, it's a very critical issue, which you'll find that in all emerging democracies, it has been a critical factor in their economic development. The integrity of presidential leadership, the way it is seen and perceived by the people within the nation state, and the way it's perceived even internationally. Presidential leadership restores confidence. It encourages investor, especially if it's a presidential leadership which is seen to be embodying the values of integrity. This is one fundamental problem which is facing the ruling party today. It's a fundamental problem which I think even the Integrity Commission of the ANC is failing to pin down in its resolution. Because they do talk about very important issues of integrity in the ANC, but the commission doesn't zoom into a very important point: presidential leadership.
Ume, what do you think about that?
Yes, I mean, it's an important issue. If you go back to the Polokwane conference in 2007, the strategy and tactics document that was adopted there, it mentions something very important about the significance of exemplary conduct. It says all leaders or members of the ANC must lead by example wherever they are. Now, if we were to take the president's conduct in relation to the Guptas as leadership by example, and you multiply that at the provincial level, premiers do the same thing. They have their own business people that they relate to. Councillors do the same thing. You go to parliament, MPs have the same kind of arrangements, and the entire government is like that. I mean, you can't lead a country like that. It makes it very difficult. In fact, in this case, the president denies. I mean, in Parliament this week, he denied. He says that nobody instructs him to appoint ministers. He is in charge. His words. He's in charge. Let's
not forget, gentlemen, these are still allegations here. So let's speak in context of that. Mpumelelo.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying I'm quoting him where he says he's responding to these allegations that were put to him by the opposition, and he says, "I am in charge. I'm in control. I appoint cabinet ministers. Those who say they're not appointed by me, go ask them." That's what he said. It's not me who said that. So I'm saying that, but in the case of a president, even the perception of it, or even anything that might lead to that perception, you have to be able to confront it. Whether it's perception or fact, you have to confront it.
All right, let's leave it there on that topic because it's going to continue when we come back from the break. After that, we're going to take a look at the biggest newsmakers this week, the Guptas. Do stay right there.
Therefore, let me state the facts on the matter of whether I was approached by non-governmental individuals in respect of the position of Minister of Finance. Members of the Gupta family offered me the position of Minister of Finance to replace the then Minister Nene. I rejected this out of hand. The basis of my rejection of their offer is that it makes a mockery of our hard-earned democracy, the trust of our people, and no one apart from the President of the Republic appoints ministers. I have hesitated to speak out publicly on this matter until now, but I feel it is no longer possible to remain quiet. The primary concern to me is that this issue has a real danger of diverting away attention from the real and urgent challenges we face as a country.
Vera Ephraim defied family and traditions to follow her dream.
Decided that I'm going to prove to them that they were wrong.
The first breakthrough came in when she was studying and touring in Europe.
That was my first breakthrough.
Generations was her first television debut in South Africa.
It was my first gig. I was very excited. I was very happy. I said, yeah, this is confirmation I'm at the right place.
After pain, rejection, and suffering, her dream became a reality.
I followed my path, and I'm happy and grateful and blessed.
Join your host, Puleng Mulabati, on Rupilong every Friday at 17:30.
Media Monitor, welcome back. Remember to give us your views on our Twitter page at SA Media Monitor. Now, the biggest story in the media this week was the alleged influence of the Gupta family on the country's presidential decision making, especially with the appointments of his cabinet. Now, this aroused public curiosity about the background of this family. Gentlemen, I think for the benefit of our viewers, a lot of people want to know. And the question has been, how did the Guptas arrive in South Africa? And also, I think the word they used this week was, how did they get to wield so much power over the presidency? Let's start with you, Mpumelelo.
Well, the Guptas come from a district called Saharanpur I think in northern India. And they came here around 1993, according to the information that we have. That was just on the eve of the democratic breakthrough. And they had obviously business ideas that they wanted to pursue here. The only thing what distinguishes them from other typical foreign direct investors or other business people coming from abroad was that it seems as if their first point of call was to have political connection. So they tried that under the former President Thabo Mbeki's government, and they befriended Isop Bahat, who at some point was minister in the presidency under Thabo Mbeki, and they involved him in their companies, including the company that the media company that they owned. And initially they produced a journal called The Thinker, where Isop Bahat was one of the editors and contributors. So it kind of had some intellectual discourse going in that journal. Government people and other progressive people would contribute there. It seemed, from that point of view, to be a very honest kind of journal, kind of journal that can stimulate debates in society. The other thing that they did immediately then, it seems, as a result of those connections, was that the company, Sahara Computers, obviously named after the area where they come from, the Sahara Computers then began to get some contracts in government to supply computers and things like that. And then from then on, it looks like they then realized that perhaps with a bit more aggressiveness, they can get more out of government. With under Thabo Mbeki, it didn't really get too far to the extent that we saw what we are seeing now. It just ended there. There was a journal that was published. Articles were contributed by Isop Bahat. and all of that. And of course, Isop was involved in the initial setup of the New Age. He was one of the directors in that company. And you'd remember that our colleague Vuyo Mvoko was supposed to be the first editor there, but of course he left quite quickly. So, and then as they were getting more aggressive with the political connection, which was their strategy to set up a business in South Africa, they realized that under President Jacob Zuma, they can actually wield more influence than ever before. And they were proven correct, because the more they got closer to him, they got closer to his family. He told an ANC meeting, I think 2 weeks ago in the Eastern Cape, when they asked him about this, that what's your relationship with the Guptas? He said that the Guptas, they hired his son, Tutuzane, when nobody was prepared to give him a job. He was knocking on major companies. They were not able to give him an internship in the IT sector. And since they were running an IT business, computer business, they gave him a break. And he was able to crack into the industry via them. That's the explanation he gave. But we do know that other family members of the president subsequently then worked for the Gupta business empire as it was growing. One of his wives worked for them. His daughter also at some point worked for them. So it was one business after business. Then they entered into resources sector. Then they entered into property sectors. So the empire grew, and as it grew, it needed more of the same political capital that they were using. Political capital meaning having proximity to the state. And then because some of the businesses require government licenses. Mines, for example, require government licenses. So the more they hit stumbling block with the regulatory authorities, the more they try to ease that by political proximity towards the president. And at some point, I think, either the president was now allowing them to do that, or they actually themselves got carried away and everyone was realizing that they've got so much political power. They were then dropping. The next thing they were landing in Waterkloof Air Base with their wedding guests. And then things just got out of hand. And at some point, it looks like the president was not able to have any control over them. All
right. Well, that's where we leave it with the arrival of the family. But listen, the family has been on the news numerous times over controversies, such as Mpumelelo has just mentioned, the landing of their private plane, landing at Waterkloof Air Base, as well as their business dealings with government. Now, Prof, look, there's been a lot of noise about the family's relations with government. What do you make about this now? And let's talk about the fact that on Thursday, the Guptas actually responded by putting up a 2-page spread of how they started their business in their own newspaper, detailing how they actually came to be the power that they are, and they are claiming no wrongdoing there.
Yes, Alicia, the Guptas in South Africa, they are actually, I think there's a history of business in that family, because even their father, who lived, as Mpumelelo indicated, in some northern state in India, is apparently quite a well-known businessman. So they came here in South Africa to explore, find business opportunities, and build business. And that's what they have done. But the greatest problem, and I think Mpumelelo has inferred that already, is in their strategy.
When did it become illegitimate or rogue, so to speak?
Their strategy creates difficulties, especially for a young democracy such as South Africa, where issues of leadership, and especially leadership with integrity, are still very important. Their relationship, especially with the highest office in the land, the office of the president, is the one which is actually raising numerous questions. Yes, they tried during the Mbeki era, but the relationship didn't go far at all, you see. And I think President Mbeki at that time knew very well that as head of state and president of the country, you also have ethical duty towards the people that you lead. So this time, it has really gone too far, and it has really exploded. But of course, the difficulty, which I pointed out earlier when this thing emerged, was that how do we draw a direct link? How do we actually say these guys have been acting as per instruction from the president? Because that was
exactly
difficult.
The question.
That was very difficult to prove. And I actually said, when I was talking during the week, I said, this is going to be the line which the National Executive Committee is going to push, and they will find a point around which they unite to defend Mr. Zuma. And I think so far that's what is happening.
Look, I mean, let's not forget that the Guptas have been fingered in the offering of jobs here, and not the president as per se, Mpumelelo. And I'm going to insist on this point throughout, but let's just base our debate around that. What do you think about this?
Okay, let's for satisfaction, Alicia, let's leave the president out of the equation.
Yes,
Let's look at them and their business strategy.
Yes, absolutely.
I'll point to a pattern here. If you look at what happened at Eskom before they entered into 2 multi-million rand contracts, right? People had to be suspended.
So that's his latest revelation?
Yeah, he also made his own revelations. People had to, but Seduso Matona, who was the CEO, they had lasted for just about 6 months or so, and then was removed. And shortly after he was removed, the first 2 contracts that were signed, the major contracts, were contracts that gave business to the Gupta family. Moving forward, the recent deal that they had at Denel, where one of their companies was going to be a marketing agent for arms in Asia. Before that deal was signed, shortly before it was signed, a number of executives were suspended at Denel. And while they were on suspension, a deal was signed. So there's this pattern, and if you look at again, if you look at the appointment of Mosebenzi Zwane as Mineral Resources Minister, right? The first major deal that happened under him, first major deal, was the Tegela deal, where that company owned by the Guptas bought Glencore mine in Witbank. So again, a minister was removed, another one came in. First transaction that happens is going to do with the Gupta. So there's a clear pattern here. I don't know whether you can safely say it's coincidental, but clearly it can't be coincidental.
Prof, what do you think?
It can't be coincidental. I think I agree with Mpumelelo. It can't be coincidental. But unfortunately, if the matter will have to go to courts of law, the burden of proof is going to be very severe.
I think that's...
It's going to be very severe for the people who've made the revelations. And you see, the severity of the problem, Mpumelelo, is that, you see, in our politics, we have formal politics that we know. But there are also areas of informality, discussions, networks that happen in the areas of informality. How you take these from the informal arena to the formal arena in order to approach courts of law becomes such a challenge, you see, because these interactions are actually not, there's nothing documented. It's your word against mine, you see. So I think this is the gray area which the Gupta-Zuma affair has actually exploited. The informal networks, the informal arenas that are actually very important in influencing the direction of formal politics.
Look, Prof, the recent revelations of cabinet ministers, of course, among other people, about the Gupta family offering them positions have caused quite a stir in the country. And following these revelations, ANC General Secretary had this to say.
The reality of the matter is that we're not dealing with an incident here. We're dealing with a tendency where the state can be an agency state, which will represent interests instead of doing what it should do. And the ANC must be able to deal with that as early as now, because if it grows and it gets entrenched, it is going to be this much more difficult to deal with it.
Now here's a twist. The General Secretary also lambasted as arrogance how the Guptas actually responded to the revelations. What is your take on that, Mpumelelo?
Well, if indeed the Guptas are arrogant, as Gwede thinks they are, and many people think they are, the question is, what is he going to do about it as Secretary General of the
He's
ANC?
urged all other MPs to come forward if they've been offered jobs by the Guptas.
And then what? Because they've already come forward. You have had Feki Mento coming forward telling his own version, You have heard Mkhabela Jonas telling his own version. And we have heard Mwako Ramatlodi coming out telling his own version. We have heard Zola Tsotsi, former chairman at ESCOM, telling his own version. And this morning we have got Themba Masego, former cabinet spokesperson and DG of GCIS, coming out telling his own version. And I've also mentioned some of the troubling pattern that we have seen happening in the last few years. So what is the Secretary General of the ANC then going to do? I want to come to the issue that the Prof raised about formal and informal politics. To say, when the issue takes a legal a path, you have to have, there's a burden of proof among those who make the allegations to prove these things. But I want to point out that our politics is not only governed by the informal as well as the legal part. There's something embedded in our constitution. The constitution doesn't only require our public officials to follow the law. There's also the ethical element in it. And the ethical element of it is the one that goes deep into your conscience as a person. The formal legal part of it is the part that we can observe, we can see, it can be proven, right? But there's an ethical element that lies deep in your soul. And by the way, that's the part that I think broadly in the media, we actually underestimated when we read the statement from Mkhabela Jonas. He was not, we just leapt on the fact that he confirmed that the Guptas offered him a position. The major part we didn't look at in detail. The background and the context that he gave. His commitment to the oath of office, which is a very ethical issue. His conscience, he raises the issue that this is about my conscience, it's about my commitment to the country. Those kinds of things are not things that you can actually put out there for legal trial or legal tribunal. It comes deep in you. We must, as a society, see you as somebody, as a representative of ours, as somebody who has got that kind of ethical, some people call it moral capital.
So why are the Guptas denying it and calling it xenophobic attacks against them, Prof?
Well, Alicia, I think in their position, they have to find all solid, hard excuses they can find to defend themselves, you see. Because you see the way how this appears, because they might as well raise questions that, look, there are families of very huge capital and wealth that actually influenced the formation of the democratic state at the very beginning. Why did you not talk about them? Why are you picking on us? Is this xenophobic because you only came in South Africa 1993 and my other brother came in 1997? So there is logical ground, even though I would say it's truthful ground, to raise the issue that, look, South Africans are being xenophobic in this case.
Look, have we failed here to recognize that the Guptas have opened companies that have given South Africans some jobs, sustainability, so to say, Mpumelelo?
Well, to a certain extent, you can argue like that, but here's the difference between them and other foreign investors. If you want to start a factory, you want to manufacture something, you come to the country, you apply with the relevant authorities, you set up your factory. You can't, if you want to set up a factory, you want to remove another person who's there already. So their strategy, part of it, if you look at the way they've dealt with Exaro and the way they've dealt with Glencore, is that somebody must exit the supply chain to ESCOM so that they can come in. So that's one of the allegations that has been made. And secondly, the second part of the strategy is that you then use what you get from government, right? You don't come with original money. You get connections, you get a deal via government, which you then use to fund other projects for you to get more deals. So you have to be, in my opinion, if you really want to start a business, be inventive, be an entrepreneur. Start a greenfield, as the economists call it, a greenfield project. New factory, everyone can see it's coming through, it's rising there, new mine. And then when you start a new mine, you look for contracts. Don't shortcut other people. Because what is happening now, people are coming up with more information to say, okay, let's take the story of Themba Masego that's in the Sunday Times this morning. One of the Gupta brothers calls Temba, and of course Temba also alleges, as you correctly should say, Temba alleges that the president also called him to say, meet the Guptas. When he meets one of the Gupta brothers, the Gupta brother says, we're starting a media company. We want government advertising to come to us. So in other words, divert business that goes to the existing media companies to them. So I'm saying that's not how you should be doing business. You can start your media company. When it's good and it's getting circulation or viewership, the numbers speak for themselves, advertisers will come. You can't shortcut other people so that you can come in.
All right, so Mpumelelo, they're clearly blaming the strategy. Well, it is time to take a quick breather. And after that, more scandals as we look at the FIFA bribe allegations and SAFA suspensions. Please don't go anywhere.
It would therefore seem obvious that given the fact that all of us are keenly interested to accelerate progress towards the creation of a truly non-racial and non-sexist society, we must do at least three things. The first of these is that we must carry out a comprehensive and critical assessment of our policies and programs during our years of democracy, to try to discover and determine why we have not made greater and more decisive progress in terms of the eradication of the legacy of colonialism and apartheid, as this bears on the strategic matter of the creation of a non-racial and non-sexist society.
Molemo, when pregnant with her first daughter, Relebogile knew that she wanted her daughter not to experience any identity issues. This is when she decided to look for toys that resembled Black as Beautiful.
I think for me, it was also just to get our girls to have some sense of identity, some sense of belonging.
I grew up having black and white dolls, and going to a multiracial school, I did not really see color. So for me, it's this thing of she should actually know what her true identity is.
Join your host Puleng Mulebati on Bophelong every Friday at 17:30.
My guests this morning are Professor Kwandile Kondlo, political analyst, and Mr. Mpumelelo Mkhabela, Sowetan journalist or editor. Join our hot conversation at SA Media Monitor. Moving on now, the 2010 FIFA World Cup bribery scandal continued this week, with Sports Minister Fikile Mbalula maintaining that the $10 million paid to the World Soccer governing body FIFA was for the African Diaspora Development Project. He insists that South Africa has nothing to hide. Here's more on this insert.
We've got nothing to hide. We will explain to them how it happened, at what level decisions were taken, and that is it. And in our view, these decisions were taken within the legal framework, even within FIFA, including its finance committees, that finally transferred these funds to where they actually belong. So we will meet with FIFA on this point, the new president and all those who are involved, to basically submit to them whatever that they need as information on our part with regard to this 10 million.
Gentlemen, I just want to hear your views, especially after the comments from the Minister. Let's start with you, Prof.
Well, I think the FIFA saga was actually a bit, I would say, jaw-dropping. We were all surprised because we still don't know what exactly happened and how FIFA arrived at the conclusions that it has tabled. And I still think this matter is going to take some time before we get to the bottom of it, because what we are interested in as citizens really is the truth about this whole matter.
Look, Goddard, the whistleblower, has been banned. Leslie Sedibe calling FIFA officials cowards, and Minister Mbalula maintaining that there was no bribe. Mpumelelo, so what really is the story here?
Well, there's two issues here. There's the match fixing
yes,
scandal.
the match fixing, yeah.
Issue, as well as the bigger FIFA thing that has been going on, of bigger wide-scale corruption that has been reported on FIFA. I think that from our part, I would understand the Minister Mbalula's sentiment here. This hosting of the World Cup in South Africa, as well as everything that had to do with it, the whole football saga was something that we were very proud of, and people don't want an inch of that kind of integrity to be chipped away, because it's one of the biggest successes this country has ever clocked, and everybody admits all over the world. So to now come with this bribery scandal kinds of set us back. So I would understand his kind of frustration and anger. Why are these people coming up with these things? Also, it's also reported that other countries have had worse cases where bribery was done quite openly, but they were never investigated. So there's an issue about why are you zoning in on South Africa? Do you have an issue specifically with South Africa? The third issue is whether perhaps this bribe may have been asked by whoever under the guise of helping soccer development in another region which South Africa has got a good relationship with. So it also touches on the foreign policy of government. Under the then president, the African Renaissance issue was one of the top issues on the agenda, and there was also a commitment to help other countries with development. So it looks like this money was channeled under those guys. Is South Africa responsible in terms of what happened after the money was channeled there? That's the question that Mbalula is also raising and other people are raising, to say, should we be held accountable to what happened to that money? Then there's the issue of the issue of Sedibe. Obviously, he's rejecting these whole allegations against him, and he's saying that he's got nothing to hide as well, and he's done nothing wrong. But of course, they've issued a ban on him, and they've issued a fine on him. So, we'll see how the minister is going to tackle this one, because obviously the country is cast in a negative light.
But Mpumelelo, on that note that you're saying that the 10 million could have been, under the guise of something else, as the minister is saying it was for the development project for the African diaspora. The people who received it are currently being prosecuted, and this is a confusing investigation because you're getting bits of it overseas and then now it's coming back to South Africa. Prof?
Yes, it's like I say, this is it's a bit confusing.
Yes,
sometimes,
it is.
Because you just can't really get to put a finger on what is
really
exactly happening. Yes. How was the investigation conducted? What was South Africa's response to it?
That's what everybody's saying. They haven't even been given a chance to look at those investigations.
Yes, that's why even Leslie Sedibe was so upset, you see, because the whole thing is just so murky, so confusing, so fluid. There's nothing really concrete and specific.
But I think the issue is whether when we transferred that money into that account, whether we knew, because that's the issue, whether you knew that you were paying a bribe or whether you were just paying this money honestly, but the people who took it then used it for other purposes. I think where South Africa's case is weak is how is it possible that you could actually release such a lot of money and not follow up on what happened to it, how it was done. So, South Africa can be accused that it knew. That's why it never followed up about how that money was used.
All right. Prof, what do you think? Anything to add there? Should South Africans then, be scared and wait for this big revelation by FIFA to come out in trying to taint the good name that was the FIFA World Cup in South Africa?
Well,
or perhaps we should learn something?
Yeah, we should learn something, definitely.
But
with me as an academic, I tend to read it in the context of what we call the North-South relations.
Meaning?
The relations between the northern countries, the so-called developed world, and the so-called emerging economies. Because there's a whole lot of finance which goes into soccer, especially FIFA.
True.
Huge amounts of money, you see. And we see now America leading the charge to sort of put FIFA in order and attack hotspots of corruption all over the world. Is the intention really to change the shift which was happening in FIFA towards the South? Because FIFA was becoming more friendly towards countries of the South. Hence, the World Cup in 2010 was actually hosted in South Africa. Is this going to shift the scales again? And then we see FIFA focusing more, being more friendly to countries of the North. In which case, the financial benefits will be going back to northern countries again.
But then isn't it a good thing that they're trying to stem out the corruption within there, Mpumelelo?
Is it really corruption? Or is it something more than corruption?
What do you think is more there to
that's why I'm saying, yes, corruption is there, but there is a big financial agenda. Yes. And
if the Prof's theory is correct, or conspiracy, I don't know, is correct, it will be interesting to pose the question, why didn't the Africans support their own candidate for FIFA president?
Absolutely.
If at all the issue is about between North and South.
Mpumelelo, you raise a very interesting point there. Well, we're going to leave it there, take a very quick ad break. We'll be back with more Media Monitor. Do stay with us. All right, before we take a break, tomorrow marks an important day in the country, the Human Rights Day, held this year under the theme South Africa United Against Racism. President Zuma elaborates on this year's theme.
Nation was shaken when racism reared its ugly head on social and electronic media, causing untold pain and anger. There is a need to confront the demon of racism. Human Rights Day, March 21st, will be commemorated as the National Day Against Racism this year. It will be used to lay the foundation for a long-term program of building a non-racial society.
All right, we're now joined by Mr. Wayne Ncube, a lawyer for human rights in this segment. A very good morning to you, Wayne. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Look, Wayne, dating back to the 1976 student revolts, the march against the Dom passes, and now racism in 2015. I mean, how far have we come in recognizing our human rights, specifically when it comes to racism?
So I think the Constitution is a good place to start. We obviously changing our laws and passing the Constitution, which sets out some of the bounds and rights that people have, has been very important. I think one of the places where we haven't really taken forward particular issues like racism is adoption of certain legislation like a hate crimes bill or act, which would then further regulate how such rights, the right to freedom of speech and inequality is dealt with.
Look, Wayne, why do you think we've failed to address racial issues after so long?
So obviously, historically, the way in which our country passed into independence and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, it might be that there wasn't a lot of progress which was done after that. And it is something that obviously as a society we need to take further even forward. And one of those areas is, has been mentioned by the Ministry of Justice recently, is this hate crimes bill, which they planned to have in public comment as early as June. And I think this will really help in a lot of ways in dealing with some of the racism issues which do not fall within the ambits of our constitution.
But when everybody agrees, even those
Yes.
people that are for the criminalization of hate crimes or racism, so to say, that this legally is a bit of a complicated one, and it's going to take some time to come through. And you're speaking of constitutional changes. Tell us more, how would this actually happen?
Okay, so right now the bill, which has not even passed through cabinet yet. So, like you say, it will take a lot of time, and it will have to pass through.
What do we do in the interim? I mean, there's racism that's happening on a daily.
So, I think our criminal justice system already provides us with certain mechanisms to deal with certain hate speech which would incite violence, and I think really what it is more about getting your public prosecutor and your police to investigate more thoroughly these mechanisms. It's also about getting people informed about our equality courts and utilizing them a lot more. We have this brilliant equality court system which a lot of people don't know about, and a lot of people don't know how they can be pushed forward to access their rights. But then it is, as you say, a very complicated debate, because you also have freedom of speech, which is a very, very important right in a democratic society. So in trying to curb racism, it is a very delicate balance that you have to play, because freedom of speech is fundamental, and it should only be trying to criminalize speech insofar as it incites violence against a particular hate group. But in terms of bringing a society together, a society which is as divided as ours, we do need people to be talking about these issues, right? And even if sometimes you will hear views which you might not particularly like, a national dialogue is very important.
But why a lot of people are blaming the lack thereof of economic transformation, and saying that some people feel entitled and that they have more rights because they're still the majority in the most common workforce. What is your view on that?
So I think, everyone has an opinion, and that will be based on your social and class and racial upbringing, right? And I think as a society, regardless of what divide you stand on, a lot of us grew up in these very unequal societies where we probably need to unlearn a lot of our socialization. And that really requires these open debates in society. So it is important that, yes, these people air their views, and then they have an opportunity for people to then point out exactly why that is incorrect, to be able to see other people's perspective. Because obviously if you live in a sheltered house, in a bubble,
you're not going to understand.
Yes, you will not understand the plight of people. You're not going to understand the plight of these students who are disenfranchised, who are not able to access education, and from your own specific background, you might have your kind of worries are very narrow. And so it is important that there is a dialogue, and that's why free speech is important, because it allows people to communicate these views, which might be incorrect, but at least provides an opportunity for others to be able to explain why they're incorrect, and then to bring society together.
Thank you so much. When everybody says these debates really need to take place, we shouldn't just sweep them under the carpet, because that is why these things are bubbling under. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Wayne Ncube, human rights lawyer, here with us on Media Monitor. We'll be back shortly after this break.
I appointed Jonas as a deputy minister. That's what I offered Jonas. I never offered Jonas ministry. That's why he's a deputy minister. If Jonas says he was offered by the Guptas, I think you'll be well placed to ask the Guptas or Jonas. Don't ask me. Where do I come in? I had no business with that. I had absolutely no business. Ask the people who are said by Jonas offered him. Those are the people who must ask, my good honorable member. Don't ask me. I am in charge of the government. I'm in charge. I appoint in terms of the constitution. There is no minister who is here who was ever appointed by the Guptas or by anybody else. Ministers who are here were appointed by me.
Welcome back to our final segment now of Media Monitor. Gentlemen, I just want to find out from you before we look at the light story, what do you think will be topping news headlines this week? Let's start with you, Mpumelelo.
Well, I think the reaction to whatever decision the ANC takes or doesn't take this weekend will be critical. From the business sector themselves, from the business sector, religious leaders, remember, they also made a call that the ANC need to take certain critical decisions to restore the confidence in the country. There's another story which I think will be critical. The Freedom Under Law wanted to, an urgent court application heard, I think this coming week, around the constitutionality of having Benning Clemens as head of the Hawks. I think that is going to be debated in court because a court had made an adverse comment on his integrity as a dishonest person. So they are saying that he's busy pursuing all these things around Pravin Gordhan. Is he really the right kind of a guy to be doing that, given what the judges had said about him? So that matter might come up in court this coming week. We'll hear.
Prof, what do you think? The commission probing into the Gupta's influence, that might just make headlines.
I think the new revelations that have come, especially from a government official who actually says the president directly called me. I think there's going to be a lot of follow-ups. Other parties might actually be strengthening, preparing court papers, running to courts. I think there's still going to be a lot around the Gupta issue. And also the Moody's rating, yes, is going to be a debatable issue.
All right. Now, very quickly, this week, two notable international events put this country on the world stage and made us proud. Let's take a look at this insert. All right, we can't have that insert, but can we have a look at the tweets? Do we still have tweets from today? I think we are actually, yes, we still have time for tweets. Gumete783 says, why isn't there a single example of good governance in Africa? Mzansi Governance says, there's a saying by that comrades did not go into the bush or exile to be poor. It's payback time and others can go jump. Lu Voganzundu says, how come we develop other countries while our country needs to be developed? Something fishy about this saga. Last but not least, Jeffrey Madi says, actually, I think Jack Warner needs to come out and give his side since the money went under his name. As I was saying, that Jack Warner is being prosecuted and he accepted that bribe. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time this morning.
You're calling it a bribe already.
Well, that's what FIFA is alleging. Well, it's been another highly informative 1 hour. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are available on digital and social media platforms. Make a date with us again next week where we unpack news that make everyone talk. I'm Alicia Jali. You've been watching Media Monitor here on SABC News. Have a great Sunday further.
The growth challenges facing the economy are compounded by the deteriorating outlook for global growth. The committee assesses the risks to the growth outlook to be on the downside. Given the upside risk to the inflation forecast and the protracted period of the expected breach, the MPC decided that further tightening was required to complement the previous moves. Accordingly, the MPC decided to increase the repurchase rate by 25 basis points to 7% per annum effective from the 18th of March 2016.